Hello everyone, this is Daughter Darkness, and today I'm going to be reviewing episode 9 of series 11 of Doctor Who, that is, It Takes You Away. And going into this episode, we've had a streak of really good episodes. I'd kind of felt lukewarm about the first half of the series, but since the halfway mark, we'd had 3 episodes that I liked increasingly. So it felt like we got a bit of momentum, and I was hoping it would go through to the final episode. It doesn't. Of all the episodes in this series, this has been the hardest to really get an idea of what I actually think about it. Normally I can go, oh, I think that was a good episode, or a bad one, or a middle of the road one, but this one, I really wasn't sure until a couple of days after I saw it whether I actually liked it or not. And I think the way that I'm going to put it is, again, it's not bad. It's just that the ideas it's got are too big to all be crammed together in one single episode, so it just kind of ends up not really working in terms of any of them. Conceptually, the idea of having this other universe that's just trying to be part of our own, I think that's a really good idea, and there is some good stuff that they do with it in this episode. It's just a shame that that's left until the last sort of 15 minutes of it rather than being the episode. But really what I think about this episode is that it's got 3 episodes with the potential of being really good, all shoved into a single episode. We've got the setup at the start, we've got this abandoned house in a completely remote area, and the only person there is a young blind girl. And then there's a creature that makes noises in the background and all that kind of stuff. It's got all the makings of a decent sort of haunted house type episode, something like a Hide or a Knock Knock, episodes that aren't amazing, but they're pretty competently done. And it does a pretty good job of building up the atmosphere in terms of that. But then we come to this mirror, and then we end up in this bridge universe thing, which is something that is an interesting idea, a space between worlds in a way. And yeah, I know we had the Void, as was mentioned in series 2, but something tangible between this universe and another one. It's an interesting concept and something that they could have really gone off the walls with. You could have had some really interesting visuals and ridiculous creatures and that kind of thing inhabiting this area, but it ends up just being a cave with this weird guy with a knife, or 2 knives, and then these death moth things, which isn't exactly the most creative kind of creature that you can come up with. And then you have that, and then you leave that and go into this other universe. This was where things got a little bit weird. This universe was effectively luring people in using their dead loved ones. It does that with the girl's dad, who's missing his wife, and then Graham, who of course is missing Grace. I did think they were going to use this opportunity to give a cameo to like an older companion or something of the Doctor's, but that's not how it turned out. I'm not really complaining about that. It's just the sort of thing that this show tends to rarely squander the opportunity to have had, like River Song or Rose or someone like that as the thing that this creature took the form of, rather than a frog. Because ultimately this universe just doesn't want to be lonely, it's a sentient universe. And I do really like the idea of that. The universe, it's not evil, it's just lonely. It does really seem like we've decided not to bother with monsters for this whole series, because apart from the Kablam Man and maybe the Pating, there aren't really any memorable creatures at all in this series. And we're at episode 9, we've got literally 1 episode left, and we've had a single really good alien threat type thing. It's not necessarily a problem, but it does seem really odd that they've squandered this vast array of creatures that Doctor Who has. They went in with a brief, okay, we are not reusing Daleks, Cybermen, Sontarans, Ice Warriors, we're not reusing any of that stuff, we're doing our own thing. That's fine. But if you're gonna do that, at least actually do your own thing, rather than just having really bland insert monster of the week kind of things in there. None of the creatures in this series have the potential to become recurring. They're all just little one-off things that we'll see on that episode and then never again. And I don't have a problem with the resolution of this episode. The frog thing is weird, but the universe and its relationship with the Doctor and the fact it just wants people with it, but it can't physically sustain that, I like that idea. I think it's just that we spent all this time faffing about with speakers pretending to be a monster and death moths that we just don't have time to actually explore this idea or end up with some kind of creature that's memorable. And that's really where this episode falls flat. It's got a lot of decent ideas, but it just tries to do too much. And it ends up with the best idea they've got being shoved into the last 15 minutes of the episode. I think you could have had this as a 3-parter. You have the first bit where you're in the house and you've got some kind of creature, not speakers, some kind of creature that you're trying to escape from, and then the way you actually get out is through the portal. Then you spend the second episode in this anti-universe thing, which is a little bit more interesting than a cave, and I can only assume they've run out of money at this point, which I guess is fine. Doctor Who can be done on the cheap, but it is what it is. And then the third episode could be spent in this extra universe. But so what we're left with is just an episode that doesn't really satisfy anything. Again, it's not bad. Most of the stuff is relatively well done. It's just there's too much and none of it is developed enough. However, on the character front, I quite liked Ryan and Graham in this episode. I mentioned last week Yaz had become my favourite companion. I think she's back to being my least favourite now. It's kind of weird with the way this series has gone. I've almost felt like every episode I've come out of it with a different companion being the one I like the most. Yaz really got the short straw in this episode. It's all about Ryan's relationship with this girl and then Graham's continuing bereavement over Grace's death. And the scene with him and the Grace illusion thing, it's nice enough, it's pretty well done. And then of course it's nice that Ryan has finally turned around and called him Grandad. Although it's obviously fairly obvious that we've been waiting and building up to that since the start of the series, and now we've just done it just in time for the series finale. What a shock. This would have been about the time you'd expect Graham to die, but he's apparently going to be in the Christmas special, so guess not. As for Ryan, I mentioned his relationship with the girl. I think it's nice, but again it feels a little bit rushed. Because the idea is that he's not comfortable with children at the start, so he kind of blunders about and is a bit rubbish at handling her. And then he gets left behind with her, which admittedly is a stupid decision. You'd leave Yaz with her because she's the one who actually built up some kind of trust with her. And then the relationship develops from I hate you to suddenly they're best friends in about a scene. I guess that's the price you pay for single episode stories, especially when there's all this stuff going on around it. But for the time they had, it was still relatively well done. And speaking of the girl, I think she was an interesting character. I like the idea of her dad kind of trapping her in this house, and while the speaker thing, it's a little bit silly, I can kind of understand what the idea is, that he is not a good parent because he abandoned her, but at the same time he is still somewhat looking out for her. Though I think it's a bit odd that the dad gets off the hook at the end when he's like basically imprisoned his blind daughter in their house so he can go off and spend some time with Illusion Wife. Her blindness, meanwhile, it's a little bit random. It seems to exist purely for information to be withheld from her at the start, and then eventually for her to actually know that this Illusion Wife isn't actually her mum. But that doesn't actually have any impact on Eric's decision in the end, so pointless, I guess. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got to say really about this episode. It's definitely the strangest episode of the series, and while it doesn't really work for me having thought about it, I'm glad that they've done this kind of thing. I'm glad that this writing team is capable of doing off-the-walls and sort of silly kind of concepts of Doctor Who, rather than the very safe ones that we've mostly had, bar the historicals. I'm inclined to think the stuff is mostly well executed. They just don't really have time to give everything the development it needs, so it just kind of comes off being a bit unsatisfying. So what did you think of It Takes You Away? Please leave your thoughts in the comment section below the video, and while you're down there, please like this video if you did, and if you liked it then check out my other videos and subscribe to this channel. And as always, thank you for watching.